what is entrepreneurship? Where does it come from and why do some people do it? And I wanted to discuss it in the context of major disruptions that we've experienced in our lives. And so, you see that Macy's was the largest store in the world, but the little box that says Amazon, that store is 1,000 times larger. And when I was young, CDs were going to revolutionize everything and change the music delivery system. And my kids don't even want to use a CD, they use their Apple computer. And print media has forever been disrupted. And so the notion of where entrepreneurs come from and what it means and why me and why perhaps all of you, I think the first thing is this whole joie de vivre. I mean, I find that people who are curious, that are interested in the world around them, that have some sort of internal drive to try and understand and master and talk about and communicate something, these are the kinds of people that are going to go on and do some interesting things. And that really is the heart of the nature argument for entrepreneurship. I started a software system company back in high school and failed miserably. I ran ads in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and USA Today back when there was no internet, and my parents funded that endeavor. And failure is really important, and people talk about failure. When you go to Europe and entrepreneurship, they say failure has a big stigma. In the US it doesn't, and that's a big reason why we have an entrepreneurial culture here. That's part of it. But I did run into a friend of mine who is a venture capitalist that did actually go to a business school. I've never had an ec class in my life. And he said to me that contrary to popular opinion about enterprise creation, the Harvard Business School did a study, and they looked at entrepreneurs who had failed and then came back a second time versus untested first-time entrepreneurs. And what they found out is that the success rate was actually greater with the untested first-time entrepreneur. So that does challenge a little bit the notion that failure is a thing you learn from. So I modify it and say it's easy and important to fail small when you're young, and that should teach you. Failing when you have a lot on the table is a much bigger issue. And the last thing here is the right place at the right time. It's doing things before everyone else recognizes it's the right thing to do. That is really the ingredient. I want to move briefly into Acme Packet, and then I wanted to talk about the industry in general. I talk about the shot heard round the world SIP. So, and this isn't going to be an Acme Packet infomercial, I promise. In 1 minute, I want to explain to you what we do. There's $300 billion of annualized revenues on the telephone networks worldwide. And the telephone networks work. They all work. They've got trust, they've got identity, they've got quality of service. And we're paying for voice. But the telephone networks are rapidly going away. In 5 years, they're all going to be gone. We're not going to be using the telephone networks to make communications. The reason the telephone networks work are the same reason that cars work in New York City. There's a signaling system. So if you go to New York City and you drive in that traffic, you'll realize the lights go red, they go green, and people drive, and you slowly wind your way through traffic. But if I unplug all those traffic lights, no one's going to go anywhere. Well, that's why the telephone network works. It's got a signaling system. It's got these traffic lights. Well, if all that voice is moving over to the internet, the interesting thing is the internet doesn't have a signaling system. It's just not going to work. So not only is your voice communication not going to work, but your real-time video is going to cease to work. We're building a signaling system for the internet. And SIP is a routable signaling protocol. And so when my partner, who's an engineer, who I met at Boston Technology, said to me, wow, they've adopted SIP, this is going to change everything, he was right. Now, the serial entrepreneurs have more fun and get more money, and that is true. You have more fun because you can convince other people more easily to help you, pitch in and start shoveling or start rowing that canoe. You also have more fun because you're just never going to work as hard. You can create more value in half the amount of time, and as you get a little bit older, you get a little bit more life perspective, and more money. People, the way in which you raise money allows you to sort of have a more appropriate percentage ownership as you put these boats in the water. I can't talk enough about the fun of the second and third and hopefully fourth and fifth venture. So if you can make it through the first one, it just gets better. And the last thing is this application versus derivation. I swear that my father and I spent 90% of our time trying to figure stuff out. And it's all derivation. And when we went to Acme Packet, it became the exact opposite. We got to apply everything that we had learned. Everything. From how we raised money, how we built a management team, who we picked for lawyers, what kind of value proposition we wanted, what kind of market we selected, what kind of technology we developed. It's a lot of fun to start to apply things that you've learned. You know, what surprised me is that I had been hard at work. I started the business in '91, but I really was a priority call, but I was working in the summer of '90, and it wasn't until probably '92 that I realized I was even a seed company. And it wasn't until I really had enough capital I turned around and said, we were a startup company. It is kind of shocking. It takes a long time. You think that you can start a business with a computer, you go to Kinko's, and you get some business cards and a URL, and you're a startup. But I would argue that these are 5 very distinct phases, and the idea phase is when you're the lone voice in the wilderness, basically arguing with anyone and anything that you're right and they're wrong, and the world desperately needs what you're making. And it's an important step, because if you can't convince others, you may not be able to sell what you make. So the idea phase, when you feel like you're far enough along, you all of a sudden can go to a seed phase where somebody like your parents or your spouse or a family friend injects a little bit of capital. And that's a little painful, it's a little scary. The startup phase is really when, you know, you can start to build a team, you can articulate a vision, you can get people like real venture capitalists involved, you might get a strategic partner, and it just takes a long time. And what's interesting is the cultural implications, how you want people to feel about hitching their wagon to your business. And for myself, I've enjoyed every one of these stages. And like living in New England, I always love the season that we just had or the season that we're going to have. The season that I'm in is fun, but I like the transition. And that's what a business is all about. It's all about transitions. And what's interesting for me is that I never ran a business a full life cycle and then another life cycle and another life cycle. It has to keep reinventing itself, sort of like a circle, bringing new products to market, moving from a startup to a small cap company, from a small cap company to a mid cap company. These are very interesting things for me, and I'm really interested as well in the cultural implications. The key learnings that I had, I think first and foremost is about yourself. And I think that anyone that has been through this kind of immersive process really understands. I remember my friends used to say to me in my late 20s, they said, well, you know, even if priority call craters and you don't make anything, it was still a really worthwhile experience. And I wanted to reach out and strangle these people. Because, you know, I said, look, you know, you've been doing things. For the last 10 years, this is all I've been doing. It will be catastrophic if it doesn't succeed. I mean, there will be no other takeaway. But you do learn a lot about yourself through your successes and your failures. And, you know, you also learn about how you relate to other people and how other people relate to you as your business runs through these life cycles. Hiring and firing a management team, bringing on a CEO, figuring out how to deal with the people that now read that you have money and want to come talk to you and figure that, you know, maybe you want to invest in a film. Understanding value, that's right. Understanding value propositions. I would argue that the single most important thing that an entrepreneur can do is to select the right market, because that increases the likelihood of being at the right place at the right time. And market selection is something that is an art that takes time to learn. And I'm convinced that when people like Bobby say at ATV, say that they invest in people, not ideas, what they're saying is they're investing in people that they think can affect good market selection. Because you look at these companies that affect good market selection, it's just amazing. You know, you're going to make mistakes. I think the definition of a successful first-time entrepreneur is one who made just few enough mistakes that they were still able to succeed. And I think that's kind of true. So that's a little bit about me, and I'd prefer actually to talk about some of the market dynamics, but just to share with you where I came from. From a key market dynamic point of view, I think that there are some big trends that work regardless of which market you want to go after and what your value proposition is. And I'd like to show you that if I could. So if history repeats itself and the unexpected always happens, how incapable must be man from learning from experience? And so the notion is if we get really smart, maybe history won't repeat itself. Now, I don't buy that, actually. But I will tell you that George Bernard Shaw is one of the smartest guys I know. He won an Oscar. he won a Nobel Prize, and he founded the London School of Economics. So I mean, you really got to take this guy with a serious level of gravitas. But let's look at history for a second and apply it to some trends. So here's a mouse. This mouse weighs half an ounce to an ounce, cute, runs around, really one of our forebears, really. And nothing would be complete without a Tyrannosaurus Rex. This is a pretty big darn predator, right? Huge, eats a lot. You couldn't break into its skin. I got an idea. Let's have a cage match. Let's have the mouse compete with the Tyrannosaurus Rex in a closed room like this, and who's going to win? And it's not a trick question. We all know who's going to win. Anyone that says the mouse is going to win is not going to make a good investor, let me tell you. For 165 million years, every single day this played out on our planet, and every single day the T-Rex would win for all the obvious reasons. But one day, everything changed. Everything changed. And what happened was the things that were the advantage for T-Rex, the size, its teeth, how impervious its skin was, all of these things became liabilities. And if you haven't figured it out, that asteroid is what I think of as disruption. The single most important thing in an entrepreneur's experience and career, if they want to build a great business and touch 1 billion people, is disruption. And I'll tell you, I heard the term for 10 years before I really understood it. It was a fancy term that people who went to business school or venture capitalists would throw around, and I thought it was just a word. And it isn't. It is everything. Because we know what happened. The mouse won, and we're here, and the dinosaurs are all gone. Disruption is unpredictable, and disruption is not fair. It doesn't matter. What you want is you want the cup. Take Nortel Networks. This was the largest telecommunications corporation in North America 11 years ago. 11 years ago. Google had 12 people 11 years ago. Google has 972 million customers today. I'm not sure how you define a customer, but the market has figured that out. This company was worth $398 billion 11 years ago. There is no technology company on the planet today that's worth $398 billion. Heck, Apple isn't. This company's all gone. Nokia, this is even quicker. Nokia was a dominant smartphone manufacturer in 2007. They had 50+% of the smartphone market. They made the best phone. Heck, they'd been making phones for years. People said it was in the fish oil, it was in the jeans. Nokia, they were the phones. And in 2007, a guy in jeans and a black t-shirt who had never made a phone in his life came out and said, hey, why don't we use this? And in 2007, when the iPhone came out to today, Nokia has lost more than 50% of its market share, laying off thousands of people, tying its fate now to Microsoft for its new phones. I mean, how low can you go? I love Microsoft. I love Microsoft, don't get me wrong. But for phone operating system, I don't think so. This is unbelievable, these disruptions. I always point to Apple. Apple is amazing because Apple reinvented itself. I honestly believe that when disruption, like that asteroid, hits an incumbent, hits somebody that rules the landscape, and everything changes, it's not sometimes, it's not generally. The fossil record will tell you, you never make it through that disruptive event to have the same value proposition on the other side. And I'll tell you, if you look at Prime and Digital Computer and Wang and Apollo and you know, all these different companies, they don't exist anymore. Disruption's insidious. IBM and Apple did something amazing. Apple is not the same company today that Steve Jobs started. It's a media company. It's a phenomenal business. So I have to point that out. That happened, by the way, in the last 5 years. And Facebook, wow. The interesting thing that we should all take note of is that these folks are involved in an industry where the time frame for enterprise creation is approaching what I think Ray Kurzweil would call a singularity. And I don't understand what it really means, but it's an important force here. It took 12 years for Google to be created. And it took 7 years for Facebook to get to where it is. And it's taking 3 years for Groupon to have a $750 million IPO. right? The time frame is getting quicker and quicker and quicker, and I don't believe that's sustainable. But one has to ask themselves, do you really want to jump into that particular pond, or do you want to find something else where perhaps there's a gestation period that's more manageable? And so these are the trends I think about. Go where people aren't. Do something where all the rules are going to change and advantage you and disadvantage everybody else. History does repeat itself. We think it's all different, but find some context in which you can look at what's new and have some sort of historical compass to say it's really a repeat of what we've seen. I mean, heck, Bob Hauer sat there and said, advertising, this is what we do, and he bet big on advertising on the internet. The proximity problem, the real issue you have there is you need to get close enough to the flame to learn about an industry, to build the relationships. People are going to work with you, people are going to fund you, people are going to supply you, and people are going to buy from you. But if you get too steeped in it, you start losing sight of the real forest. And you can't say everybody's all wrong, but I do think that the conventional wisdom off. This is the last thing I wanted to bring up, and that is I always get asked, how, is Cisco going to come after you, or Juniper? And when you start your businesses, there's always established players where people say, how are you going to differentiate yourself? If it's such a good idea, the established market player at some point is just going to step on you. And I actually believe that it's hard for people to do more than one thing well at a time. And the advantage that the entrepreneur has is focus and vision. These are things that big companies and groups of people don't have because, not that they're dumb, not that they don't value these things, they're just operationally distracted. And if you can take your focus and your vision and you can pour into it investment and put one railroad tie down after the next, creating a level of experience in a historical context, I think you're going to have a truly defensible, sustainable value proposition if you're in the right place at the right time. So that's Acme Pack.